like to thank the organisers for putting me up against Larry and all of you for being here. Thank you for giving up your Saturday afternoons to hear me talk about something that's fairly few people in the world would understand or care about, I suppose. So I've recently finished a grant with the Perl Foundation to work on Devel cover. And a lot of things came out of that, and one of the things that came out was this site called cpancover.com. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about the problems I had building that, and hopefully the solutions and the current state. This is, if you go to cpancover.com, this is part of what it looks like at the moment. Who knows about Devel cover? Can I just? Okay, a fair number. Okay, good. All right. So I'm just a brief introduction is that Devel cover is the code coverage tool for Perl, and what that means is that it tells you how well your tests are testing your code. Wish I had an automatic thing here. So there are various types of coverage criteria, but the simplest one to understand is you have different statements in your code, and if your tests run those statements, then they've covered that statement. If they don't, then there could be all sorts of bugs on there, and you never know because your tests haven't run it. There's all sorts of other criteria. Just because you execute a statement doesn't mean that it's worked, even if your tests passed. But that's basically the idea behind it. And this is some output from Devel cover. This is for the mouse module. I don't know if you can see that. And here's different files in there and different criteria. And you can see some of them have 100% coverage on the statements, and some have less. And then there's different other criteria there. So that's the basics of Devel cover. I'm not going to talk very much about that today. That's the sort of the background to what's going on. When I first started writing Devel cover, I fairly soon decided that I actually wanted to test it as well. And I ran into a problem there. And the problem is that I can't really run Devel cover on itself. And there's technical reasons behind it, because I replaced the run-ops loop in Perl and override function pointers and all sorts of other stuff. But basically, I can't really run it on itself. So I needed some test code to run it on, and I wrote a few modules myself and had some of my code, so I'd run it on that. And then I thought, actually, I need a bit more code to run it on. So I was wondering where I could find a bunch of code, and it turns out there's cpan, which has got a bunch of code on it that I thought I can use this to test Devel cover. So I started doing that, and then I thought I might as well publish the results of what I've done. And so cpan cover was born, or at least the idea. And I went back onto the Wayback Machine and found this was the first cpancover.com that existed. It wasn't called that then. It sort of lived on, if you can see the URL, it lived on my server. And yeah, there was only about 20 or so modules there that were covered. I was talking with Tim last night, Tim Bunce, and commenting on how, do you remember right at the beginning there was the screenshot of cpancover.com. There's now 25,000 or so tables, rows in that table, and it's pretty. It can't be managed like that. So Tim suggested just having a set of links on the front page, and there it is way back then, just a set of links on the front page. So. The other thing Tim also mentioned to me was that when Devel NYT Prof first took the HTML from Devel cover, one of the first things he did was to tidy up the HTML and or the CSS and make it look nice. And I said, I didn't actually write that HTML, someone else did it for me. And the reason is because that was my first effort. And someone looked at that and said, that's awful. We need better HTML than that. Although I was quite proud of it, because the colors grade from yellow to red, and the more red it is, the worse it is. And I thought that was quite clever, but I guess no one else really did. Do you? Okay. Well, yeah, that was the borders. That was the bit that Tim fixed. Hmm. Okay, but that's also, yeah, from the Wayback Machine. Um, so the question then is which modules. I had a list there of about 20, and so the question is how did I choose those modules? And so the first thing is, I mean, eventually it grew to a few hundred or so. So obviously I chose the modules that I use because I want to make sure that they're covered and keep an eye on them. Then there were modules which showed bugs in Devel Cover. Every so often someone would send in a bug report and say, hey, my module, you've got this shown as not being covered when obviously it is, or something like that. Then there's top 100 lists, and Alias has a list of various top 100s on CPAN, the most dependencies and modules that really shouldn't die, and other things. So I took those and added them to the list. And then every so often an author would say, hey, where's my module? Or send me a pull request, so I'll just add them in as well. And so that's how we lived for quite a long time. And so what wasn't covered? That's the from Modulicious, I believe. Yeah. So everything else wasn't covered. Also, anything that caused problems. Every so often, I'd try and cover a CPAN module, and something went wrong, and it caused me problems, and I just put a grep in the code to get rid of it. And also, nothing but the most stable version that was on CPAN. So it was fairly basic, but it worked, and it sort of provided a little bit of use. And when did I run this? Well, whenever I got round to it. It was very ad hoc. Every time I ran it, it rebuilt everything from scratch, the Perl version, all the modules, all the coverage for them, and just replaced the old one. And it happened whenever I got around to it and remembered to do it. So it's pretty unreliable. That's not good enough. We want coverage for all of CPAN. We want different versions of the modules. We want it always up to date. We want metadata. And we want links from MetaCPAN to this, so that when you're on MetaCPAN, you can go and have a look at what your coverage looks like. Pony. Yeah, and a pony on the bottom, yeah. Yeah, so that's the goal, minus the pony. So there's a bunch of problems that need to be solved. I don't know why I put Brian Blessed on this slide. It's from an old Space 1999 episode, which probably means something to maybe 2 or 3 people in the room, I don't know. Okay, so the first thing is I need a proper server, because at the moment this was all running on my on a virtual machine on my desktop at home, and that's not going to scale very well. We need to. It was also behind my my broadband link, which ostensibly has a dynamic IP address, and the whole thing was not really going to be going very well. I'm pulling down modules from CPAN and just running them. So yeah, I didn't really want to do that on my home machine for just everything on CPAN. Some modules are not particularly well behaved. They do things that they shouldn't for whatever reason, and maybe go into an endless loop or start consuming all the resources on the machine or something. And I certainly didn't want that on my home machine, but don't want that anywhere really, because that's going to mess things up. And then every so often, once in a blue moon, there's a little bug in Devel Cover as well that messes things up. Hard to believe, but that has happened. So those are the problems. Solutions. Well, the server was quite simple. Around the time I was doing this, Bytemark started their bigv.io servers, and they had a beta period where they said to anyone who wanted to just go and provision a server, a virtual server, and just mess about with it. So I provisioned quite a hefty one. I think I got 16 CPUs on it and a bunch of memory and all the other bits and bobs that I wanted, and started messing about with this, and that was all well and good. And then after a little while, they came out of beta, and one day I got a mail saying, this is how much this is going to cost you. And it was a large amount, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to work. So I wrote back to them and said, hey, I'm sorry I can't pay this, but you're all very nice people, and I'm going to do this with the server, and you like Perl, and how about giving it to me for free? And they said, okay. So so I said, thanks very much, and we went that way. So if you do need a if you do need a server, talk to the bite mark people, because they are very nice, and quite apart from being very nice, they're also very good. So that solved all those sorts of problems. And then the other set of problems to be solved can be solved by covering each module in a sandbox, which is very easy to say, but not quite so easy to implement. So first of all, I thought, okay, well, we'll fork, we'll exec a process to get coverage for a module. We'll sleep for half an hour or so, and if it's still running, we'll kill it. And that will help us just get through everything. But it turns out it didn't, because the kill didn't always work. For whatever reason, child processes, who knows what, I don't really know. So I thought about it for a bit, and I thought, aha, I need kill PG instead. So I did that, and it was better, and it still didn't work very well. So I thought, I need a better solution. And anyway, this isn't really a sandbox. This isn't really helping me too much. So the solution was Docker, which if you've been paying attention or read the title of my talk, you will have known already. Not this Docker, not that Docker, not those Dockers, that Docker. Yeah. So who knows about Docker already? Who's used it or has read up about it? Quite a few? Okay. Those of you with your hands up probably know more about it than I do, but I will give you a brief introduction anyway. Docker is really a lightweight virtualization. It's really quite nice. And the way it works is that you create containers, and these containers have a sort of a cross-section of your server, of what you want to do with it. And the containers are also sandboxed, so it's very nice. And the way I tend to think of it is that Docker is to packaging as Git is to CVS. So those of you who remember CVS or SCCS or even SVN or something, you know that the paradigm basically is you check out a file, you mess about with it, you check it back in again. And the file is on its own. It's a separate entity, and the actual change you're making with Git, you have a layer of changes that interact, and you check them in all at once. And the same with packaging. You just have a package and you install it, and it's a set of code, a library or whatever. But you probably want a bunch of different packages on a layer to do things together, and Docker is basically that layer. And then, as with GitHub, where you can upload your Git repository to GitHub, there's a Docker index where you can upload your Docker images there, and other people can use them. So what I needed to do then was to create a container, a Docker container for cpan cover, and use that to run the coverage for a particular module. Each cpan run in a separate container, and as a very nice byproduct, then I can just run as many in parallel as I want to on the server. So let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty about how this works. So the first thing I need to do is just to be able to run devel cover on a module. And this is the code for that, and this is basically what I had before any of Docker or anything. This is how it used to work. Yeah, I get all of the modules that I want to cover. I build them, which is basically sending them off to cpan, the cpan client, and saying go off and build this. Then grovel around .cpan to find the directories where things have been built. Go into them and run coverage on those, which is basically just running make test with devel cover turned on. And then go and generate all the HTML that's resulted from that. So that's the inner core of how we get coverage for a particular module or a set of modules. But in terms of the Docker, it's just a module. So we need to create Docker images. And then what we need to do is do the basic run in Docker and then we need to extract the results out of the Docker image and have that in a sort of separate area where everything can get merged together for cpan cover. So this is how there's a series of 4 slides here, which are 4 layers of Docker images, which I'm going to use to be able to create this. So the first one is just a basic Docker image to get Perl installed on the server. Now the way Docker works is essentially you have layers, and you always build on top of a layer. And here, on the top line there, line 1, you can see I'm building on top of Ubuntu latest. So the most recent image that's available for Ubuntu on the Docker index, I'm going to build on top of that. The maintainer just says it's me. I can set an environment variable, which I need to for, I don't know if it's for Perl or for something in here, something I wanted the term to be set. And then I start doing work. So first of all, I install wget and build essential packages. Then I change directory into user local source. I go to cpan and pick up Perl 5.20. Here I need to upgrade this, but extract it, cd into the directory, then run configure with the standard options and make install. And after that, I've got Perl installed in this Docker image. So that's the first step. Next step, I need to install some modules that devel cover wants. So you can start to see the layers here. On line 1, I'm building on top of the image that I've just created. I change into user local source, install a few packages that I need, and then I install cpan minus and then use cpan minus to install a bunch of modules and then tidy up. I gave this talk in at the Swiss Perl workshop. I think it was 5 weeks ago, and I was saying that the reason I install cpan minus and then use cpan m here is because I use the -n option, which runs doesn't run the tests, just because I wanted to get it all installed quickly. And there's an option on cpan to do that. I think it might be the -f. I'm not sure, but it doesn't work. And I said that, and Brian Defoy was sitting in the audience, and he said, "I know why that is. I didn't implement it." So apparently there's an empty subroutine where that should be. So anyways, as soon as that gets implemented, then we don't need the cpan minus step. Anyway, so that builds us an image, a Docker image with these cpan modules installed. Next thing is I need to actually get devel cover itself. 2 options for that. One is just I could get the latest one off cpan, but the trouble is as I'm developing this, I don't want to have to make a new release, send it to cpan every time I want to make a change, and then create Docker images and go through the whole hullabaloo. So I've decided here, you can see line 1, I'm building on top of what I had before. I'm actually just going to clone out of Git and get the latest version of Git to use here on cpan cover. Yeah, check out the master. That's just a bit of debugging that I was making sure I was running the right Perl. And then I just run makefile, Perl makefile.pl, make test just to make sure it works. That's a target that just runs the tests in parallel. That's pretty unimportant. Then I'm not installing it. I'm actually setting a variable to say I'm going to run this locally, which is kind of irrelevant to what we're talking about, but it just makes it easier to change things. And then finally, I have a top layer, which is just the layer for cpan, excuse me, for cpan cover. That the idea is it just sets up the environment. This actually doesn't do anything. I think the path is already set, but ultimately there'll probably be a few configuration environment variables in there or something. So here's 4 Docker layers that I've got, which allow me to build a Docker image, and now we need to use them. And so this is a little script that just uses Docker to build each one, and goes through them in order, each one building on the one before. And then finally, we've got this Docker push, which sends it off to the Docker index. And when that's finished, then I have Docker images on the Docker index that I can pull down from anywhere and run cpan cover. you'll notice that this one has a no cache here. So what Docker does is it's quite clever. Is that it notices if I haven't changed any of those Docker files, it says, oh, there's nothing going here. I don't need to do all this work. I'll just use my cached version. But of course, when I go to clone the Git repository, it's got no idea whether the Git repository has any changes in it. So I have to tell Docker, don't cache that. Always go and fetch the Git repository there. Okay, so that's that. Now I need to get them onto my cpan cover server. So, and it's basically just the opposite of the push. I need to pull the images. And so that's all I need to do, just Docker pull. And then it downloads all of these images and builds these different layers. And at the end of that, I have all these Docker images sitting on my server. And then I need to run it. So a lot of this isn't particularly important. What's important is I'm running Docker. I'm linking a few disks together from the server to the Docker image so that they can talk to each other. I'm giving it a name. That's quite important. I'm limiting the amount of memory it can use. I'm telling it the Docker image that I want it to run, and I'm telling it a command to run, which that's basically the command that says go off and get the coverage for this module. And then I just wait for it to finish. So that's the internals of how I actually get things to run on Docker. Then the next thing to do, we don't need to go through all this, but at the top, I asked Docker for the logs. That's useful information to know what's happened as the whole thing was being built. I store them, and then I copy the staging directory to somewhere local and merge them all together. That's the bit where I get the results out of the Docker image and put them on the main server so that they can be used later. Then really important at the end, I do Docker rm name, and that tidies everything up for me. As long as everything's gone through nicely, that clears everything up. No more messing about with kill and kill PG and all that sort of stuff. And then, so that does things for one module. Now I want to do it for lots and lots of modules. So here are my modules here. And so basically I've just got a loop that's the command up there, Docker module. And I in parallel here, I call this subroutine, which looks like this essentially, which creates a unique name. That's the name we had earlier, out of the module and the time. And then in the eval here, we set up an alarm for 30 minutes or however long it is. We run the Docker command here. And then if we've gone over 30 minutes, we get the signal alarm, which is caught down here, and we can kill the Docker process. So that's the bit that stops too many resources being used as far as time is concerned. So that's basically how it all hangs together. The next bit we need, of course, is a list of modules to cover. So I just had my my list before that I sort of curated by hand or whatever. But Neil Bowers wrote a nice module called cpan releases latest, which just basically gives you a list of all the cpan modules and various sort criteria or filters or what have you. But basically I just want them all. So I just call that and then run this on all of those. The only thing to be careful of is when something's already been covered, I don't want to run it again. And if something's failed, I don't want to run it again either. So I just keep track of all those. So the other nice thing about Docker is that there are resource limits that you can put on it. So memory and swap accounting. I don't want any process to use up all the memory on the server. To get that working, you have to add some command line parameters to the kernel, but it's not particularly difficult. You just edit, etc. default grub, and that's what you need to put in there. So if you don't do that, you just get a message from Docker saying, sorry, I don't know how to limit the amount of memory that's being used, but that just fixes that. So then I've got all of the modules which have been run, and I was watching old Doctor Who episodes as I was putting all this sort of stuff together. So that's John Cleese. Yeah. Yeah, so then I've got all of the information for the different modules just sort of sitting in a directory there, and so I need to just do something with it all. So there's top-level HTML which needs to be created, which was the mess we saw at the beginning, and is the table with 25,000 rows in it, which ideally I'm hoping that someone is going to say, I can fix that for you. And if that's you, go to the devel cover GitHub repository, look at the most recent ticket, and say, I'm going to do that, please. But not only HTML, we also want some JSON at the top level, because what this means is that anyone who wants to can go and grab this JSON file. They can find out the modules for which the coverage information is available, a high level view of the coverage, and also a pointer to where to go and get more information. So, as I say, Meta CPAN, we want to be able to do that, and hopefully other people will, with other tools, will find that useful and can link to that if they need to. And of course, this takes up a lot of space. And I already had to go back to Bytemark and say, hey, can I have some more disk, please? Because I'm going to try and cover all of CPAN. And they said yes. So very, very nice. But even so, just compress it on there and send it out gzipped. And then just loop and sleep and just continually do this. So if you upload a module to CPAN now, then hopefully within about 15 minutes, you should see CPAN code coverage for it on CPAN cover. So I think I've got to sleep for 10 minutes. So as soon as it finishes the current job, and then there's usually every hour there's a few modules which get uploaded and get worked on. So it's keeping up to date quite nicely. So what's coming next? Well, I've already mentioned the front end is an absolute mess. It's a nightmare and needs to be sorted out. It was fine when there were 20, and it was fine-ish when there were 200 modules, but when there's 25,000, it hasn't got a hope. Also open to doing something dynamic, and maybe one of the lightweight frameworks, Dancer or Modulicious or something, and I don't imagine that would put too much extra load on the machine, perhaps something like that. The other thing is that the code coverage information that's being displayed here is coverage from me running the module on the CPAN cover server. And so that means that it's only been run under Ubuntu. It's only been run with whatever modules or whatever libraries I've already installed onto that server. So if you have a bit of code that says if I'm on Win32, do this. If I'm on HPUX, do that. And if I'm on Linux, do something else. Then you're not going to get coverage for the OSs that aren't there. Or if you've got a bit of code that says if this library is available, I don't know, an SSL library or something, do this. Otherwise, do it without encryption. Then that's not going to get covered either. So it would be nice to be able to accept coverage data from other people in some way or another, which would, it's a fairly simple-ish thing to do. Basically, get them to run devel cover and upload the data to some server, and then we merge them all together, and the output that we get on CPAN cover would show all of those. So that's something that I'd say it's the future. It's been on my to-do list for 10 years probably. So, anyway, big thanks to the Perl Foundation for giving me the grant to do all this work. Special shout out to Nick, who was the one who actually said at the beginning, "Hey, why don't you do that?" So blame him. I'm kind of nervous about this because no one seems to have any questions about anything today. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Yes. This is certainly not the I'm the well volunteered. At one time, I think it was Abe was running smoking of the Perl core on various configurations, and that kind of fell by the wayside. How is that a big thing that would add to this? This is clearly different, but could you?
Yeah.
Is that a viable? Is it? Would it be a good thing to start from this project here and go towards that, or is it?
Yeah,
not gonna
exactly. Yeah. So I had been working with Abe on that, and yeah. So we want to get coverage of the Perl core as well, the C code, and also the libraries in the Perl core, because this is just CPAN. There's a bunch of libraries in the Perl core as well. Yes, I want to build on top of this for that. There is, if you scroll all the way down those 25,000 lines on the on the front page, there is a link at the bottom that says to Perl 5 core coverage, which has a very much a work in progress from a while back on that. But yeah, that's definitely something that it's just a question of fitting devel cover into the Perl testing process and making sure that we're calling it at the right times. Yeah, any help anyone would like to provide with that is very much appreciated. Sure. Yeah. Any others? Yeah.
We'll have a sort of third question.
Is the information on the website already complete, or are you just starting to build up the whole CPAN?
Yeah. No, it's complete. It took about a month for me to get coverage of all of CPAN from the time I started, but yeah, it's up to date now and just keeping itself up to date.
So if something is missing, then this means that there has been an issue with the package running on your service? More
than likely, yeah. One of the things I want to do is also provide a link, especially when something's failed, but also maybe when something has passed, if you remember, I was getting the logs from Docker, and that basically would tell you what's happened on there. So I want to also put a link to that so people can see why there isn't coverage for a certain module up there. Yeah.
Great.
I would like to string this advert on the end of the upload of this. Yeah. Please donate to the Perl 5 Core Maintenance Fund because it funds cool things like this. Actually, don't do that. Please persuade your boss to donate 4, 5 or 6 figure sums to the Perl 5 Core Maintenance Fund because it does fund things like this. And so exactly, I guess we should thank the various donors to the Perl Core Maintenance Fund, but I can't remember offhand who they are. Please, and I'll forget somebody, which would be vile. Yes, look at TPF, say thank you to those firms, and please give generously. More of this is useful.
Exactly, yeah. Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else, or are we done? Good. Okay, thanks very much.